choose. Always being open to new modalities. Alternative health is becoming more and more, it's becoming less and less alternative, isn't it? It's becoming the thing to do. By the way, what would a Texan call craniosacral therapy? The alternative. Okay, that's a bit corny, but I had to throw that in. Okay. So, I've been stationed in Richmond Hill for about 7 years now. I want to make my clinic an oasis and also an educational center. So when people come in to see me, I do take the time to talk to them about anything they want to know. I love teaching. I come from a teaching background. Actually, I started off, when I graduated from U of T, I went into teaching, started off in the elementary sector, and then got into teaching high school English. And I always knew that there was something more for me. There was another career, and that teaching was a preparation for it. And when I was in the educational system, I saw a lot of students who struggled with learning, and who were considered lazy, and who had a bad self-image, but they actually had neurological challenges that developed out of birth trauma, early vaccinations are discovered, a lot of practices that we do, and a lot of the way we, a lot of accidents that happen to us early on that don't get properly healed, they leave an imprint, a pretty detrimental imprint to the ability for a child to fulfill his or her potential. And I wanted to be able to offer my services. So I studied a few modalities, and I was really enamored with craniosacral therapy for many, many reasons. Now, as Belinda said, it is based on muscle and bone and physiology, but there is a magic. And the more you work with it, the more you realize that there is an intelligence that we almost can say woo-woo about. But I always believe that it's very important to root a practice in the physical, in the scientific, and then allow ourselves to relate to the body's intelligence. Because the body's intelligence is an unknown. We rely so heavily on books and what comes out in research, and there is a whole resource of listening to the body and seeing how the body, what is it trying to tell you? How is it trying to deal with shock? Now, if you see, the tiniest little animal has the intelligence to curl up in a little ball when it's in danger. And when it's out of danger, it unfolds and comes out again. And this is the process of living life. We have within us a protector. And anytime we're in shock, whether it's physical or emotional or mental, or even microbial shock that we're unaware of, we have an inner protector that starts to tighten our muscles up. And sometimes at the end of the day, you kind of wonder, why the heck is my neck tight? Oh yeah, I had to talk to my boss today. Somebody told me I was late. I got upset at so-and-so. But this is the inner protector protecting yourself, your feelings. And so our container becomes compromised. Now, what is the concern of your body? Your body's intelligence wants to, the heart wants to beat, the liver wants to filter, the lungs want to expand and take in oxygen. It has an agenda. And the more confined it is, the less able it is to perform to its full potential. And I left out the brain, the agenda of the brain, to clearly think, to do cognitive work, to even right brain thinking as well as left brain. So all of these things are so important, and yes, stressors compromise our body, and we don't even realize that we're not functioning at our full potential, and then one day we wake up and we have all kinds of symptoms like migraines, or we realize we have a rash, or we realize we have terrible pain in our back, and we say, well, where did I catch it? Where did it come from? Well, it's an end result of a compression of your body, right? That reminds me, if you have a cell phone, turn it off. I'll turn mine off. Excuse me. Okay. That reminds me, yeah. So, why is it that we're more stressed these days? That's an obvious question, isn't it? The rhythms of our modern society, we talk about entrainment of rhythms, okay? It's a techno society. It's fast, it's adrenaline-paced. You go into a mall, you hear loud music, you don't hear waltzes, you don't hear the violin. It's all very driving. It's fast driving, and it's loud, and there's lights flashing, and there's like billboards, and all this stimulus. Our nervous system was not meant for that kind of stimulus. It really wasn't, because it's an organic system that doesn't change over thousands of years. It can adapt, I'll give you that, but basically it tightens up with all that stimulation and stress. And so I believe it is actually our responsibility to help the body to let go, to release, to find rhythms that counteract those harsh, stressful experiences that we have. And the craniosacral system has a rhythm within it, like a tide. It rises and falls with about 6 to 12 cycles a minute. And it is like the rhythm of a wave. Now, why do we like to stand by the seashore or by a lake and watch the waves? Because it brings us back to this quiet cycle, and it takes us out of the jagged rhythm. It helps us to switch, and when we do, our body has a chance to come back to what it needs to do. It lets go of adrenaline and cortisone. It releases tension. It balances the calcium and sodium ions. It does all those biochemical little things that we're not even aware of. But it takes your body, and there is a balance. There is a certain amount of this that's needed in your body, and a certain amount of that. And your muscle tension needs to be flexible enough to accommodate circulation and nerve flow. So everything is interactive, and when something is out of step, it sets off a chain reaction and a degeneration of body health. So that's one aspect of healing. We're looking at, I talked a lot about the physical, let's talk about the emotional too. Whatever we hold in the body and not allow to flow through becomes detrimental because it's under pressure, it's unexpressed, and it is pushed into our some say subconscious. But sometimes it is so suppressed that it's no longer remembered. But there is something, some intelligence in us that says, I can't hold this in my heart. These are feelings that belong to you. And you need to feel them to be fully human, to be fully whole. There's something we have to do. It's too much of a burden. There's too much weight. There's actually an energetic weight that's equivalent to the emotions you hold inside. Because when people let go, they say, I feel lighter. Now, I didn't take anything out of their pockets, but they feel lighter because they've released a mass of energy, and that mass is weight. And so, when we suppress the anger, when we suppress the sadness, it goes to the other side somewhere, and we don't even know how to get it back, because we put it in this locked up system. And it's the facilitator has a way of relaxing the body, putting the body into a rhythm that softens the shell, that softens the container of this core feeling. And then, when this container is soft enough, the feeling just dissipates. Now, there's not always a dramatic expression. Sometimes it's just a sigh. Sometimes it's just energy, but it lets go. And something is resolved. So that is the emotional aspect of the work. And going back to, Belinda mentioned John Upledger. He's 80 years old right now, and he had his 80th birthday last April in Jupiter Beach, Florida, where there's an institute. And he's a very interesting man. He's worked a lot with autistic children. He's worked a lot with war veterans, Vietnam veterans, and dolphins. He's a big fan of healing through, he has a dolphin cove on his beach. And he maintains a teaching network all over the world. You can go to many, many different places, and the courses are also offered in Toronto, where you can learn modules of craniosacral therapy. And he does believe that anyone can learn this. So he's kind of taken it out of the snobbery of the medical model, you know. So when he came upon it by accident. I think all great things, and it's not really an accident, but he said it was an accident because he wasn't expecting it. It was in the stars for him, though. He was already a doctor of osteopathy, and in the States, a doctor of osteopathy does surgery, not like here, okay? So he was a surgeon, and this was about 1971. Someone asked him to assist in an operation where they were going to scrape some calcium deposits from the dura membrane. And the dura membrane is like a sausage covering of the spinal cord. It's a thin, muscular, sausage-like covering, and it goes down, all the way down to the tailbone, all the way back up, and all around the brain. And there's, I don't know, this is kind of small, but you can see when you cut it open, it's like a piece of thin sheet. So that's what they did. They cut this open, and they were going to scrape some of that off. And Dr. Upledger had to hold it down. And he was having trouble holding it down because it kept moving. And that's when he first felt the craniosacral movement. And he said, you know, he timed it. It was 6 to 12 cycles a minute. And he said, this isn't a heart rhythm. This isn't a respiratory rhythm. It must be unique unto itself. And as a coincidence, a couple of months later, the Craniosacral Academy, the Cranial Osteopathy Academy, offered a course, and he took the course, and he started to connect with the cranial rhythm, and he felt motion. Now, when you palpate, it isn't just touching. Palpate is connecting to somebody's body and allowing yourself to sink into it. So, if you want to try this, you can put your elbows on the table and put your fingers along the midline and just let your hands sink. Now, if you have a very light touch, you may feel some motion. You may not feel it right away. And just experiment with that. And let your palm touch lightly. Okay, so did anybody feel anything? You may not, some people might have, some people might not. When I first connected, I didn't feel anything. I felt I was an energy worker. I was coming to the body with energy, so I needed to have some patience. So it didn't come to me the first time, but the second time, I felt like a huge wave just opened up. And it was an incredible experience to feel this wave coming and expanding, because it was magnified in my consciousness. You see, that's palpating. Palpating turns the volume up on what you feel, and you feel like you've moved a foot off the body sometimes, when it's just like hardly noticeable if someone was watching, because it's all done through your sensory tactile consciousness. Hard to explain. So a good craniosacral therapist learns to be light touched and subtle and gentle and patient, because the more pressure and the more force and the more interference from your ego, the less the body will express itself, because the body knows. The body knows. And the body's very defensive. There's a defensive nature that you need to respect. So, again, I could go through the whole history, but one of the important discoveries that's unique to craniosacral therapy are sutures, which are the divisions of the skull. And these sutures move. So when you have head injuries or birth trauma injuries, such as, like, some children get suctioned out of the birth canal, and their heads are like these cone people, right, for a while. But that trauma is left in there. And there's forceps delivery, and we think it goes away, but the nervous system leaves an imprint on every trauma. There is a specialized way the nervous system defines the trauma. It's like orange markers around the site of an accident. So if you've had a sprained ankle, that area is not going to be fully accepted or integrated. There's going to be a stay away sign. Let's not go there, because that area has been more numbed. It tends to be more numbed and not as fully vital and alive. And this is what your protector does. It'll often subdue and numb areas of injury. And it is our responsibility to to release that numbness and to let the body work through that trauma fully. And trauma work is not that acknowledged by doctors. It is so important. It needs facilitation because there is some part of your brain that says, I've hurt myself and I've frozen that area. That area has had an operation, a cut, an injury, and I'm going to wall it off because it has pain. And I want to protect the body from this pain. And eventually, we need to let the body, help the body let go of the emotional and traumatic impact of what happened so that it can welcome back to reintegrate a part of itself. Anything that's been under trauma gets walled off. If you've had pneumonia, if you've had a lung infection, that lung has orange markers around it. And the connection to that area, communication to that area, is not as good as it should be. Yes?
So Grettal, based on what you're saying then, we're all coming in with original trauma if we're having a natural birth, if we're coming through the birth canal. And then if you think about the average, let's take up to 20 years old, we've built up a lot of stuff.
Yes.
A lot of stuff.
So we can survive. It's not like we're going to die, okay? I'm not saying all of you are terribly sick, including myself. But, and here's a big but, if you do go back to that trauma and release it and revitalize that part and allow the body to reconnect fully with that part, then you've got a greater health potential and you feel the difference. For instance, if there's a lot of protection around the heart, the muscles will be very tight and rigid. That affects your circulation. Now, if you release the pectoral muscles, soften them, and allow a lot of emotional trauma to release from there, and physical, whatever, the circulation will be better, and you'll feel more, alive at the ends of your hands, your feet, and just more oxygen distribution everywhere. So, often when you do this, you can avoid a lot of diseases later on. In particular, in the brain, lately we've been seeing a lot of Alzheimer's and MS. Now, why is that? It's because the connection, the interchange of fluid between the head, the brain, and the body is obstructed. When the neck is tight, when the vertebrae are compressed, you're not going to have a flow in here. And there's going to be a lot of congestion and backup. Okay, so what is in this backup? Metal deposits, not able to be cleansed. Okay, and iron has been known to be the cause of MS. Okay, because of the inflammation of the nerves coming from the cranial. There are many nerves coming out of the brain stem. And when this brain stem is pressured, you don't have the nerve flow. And so one of the nerves releases acetylcholine, which is the motor chemical. And that you start to get tremors, Parkinson's. Opening up the flow between the brain stem and the spine is one of the unique properties of craniosacral therapy. And once This area has less compression. You're thinking clearly. I have a lot of clients who say to me, I can read and concentrate so much better. I wasn't able to focus on anything. I couldn't open a book. I couldn't remember things. I was in a fog. And students, especially kids, their schoolwork improves. So there's a lot there to help us, even though we're not, going to, it's not life-threatening. Perhaps if we don't pay attention to these old injuries, we'll still survive, but we'll have less communication, nerve communication, less circulation, and eventually we're going to have a breakdown of health. And by then,